Hi, this is Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. And today, I'm going to answer a question from a guy named Hugo who wrote in. An interesting question here. This one came in a little while ago, but I've been meaning to address it on the podcast because I think it touches on a great subject that we can all identify with. The subject of his question that he wrote into a podcast at SonicScoop.com was, question, never-ending acquisition of gear. Hugo writes, hey, a resident of LA County here. You're obviously working at a higher level than I am in workplaces with, higher grading than my bedroom. But in your experience, do studios and professional engineers like yourself ever become content with the gear they have and just stop acquiring more gear at some point? I've found myself wanting more, even though I'm aware of the falsehood of believing that better gear means better productions. Although there is a shred of truth to that, he says. Whether it be plugins, pedals, computer equipment, amps, etc., I find myself just wanting better gear. And I wonder, is this all to distract me from simply producing because deep down I'm just not that good? Or is this some pathology we all fall into? I appreciate you taking the time to read this, man, and I would love to hear back. Bless up, says Hugo. Bless up right back to you. I haven't heard that one before. I like it. It's a good question. I mean, all of us have been there, right? We've all experienced what they call G.A.S, and not just the gastrointestinal variety, but G.A.S, gear acquisition syndrome, G.A.S. The wanting more gear, the better playing, better music making, better sounding records are just waiting around the corner of that next piece of gear. We all get it. Because we all have made purchases that have actually changed our experience for the better. Like we have had a situation in our careers or, our hobbies or whatever it is, where we bought the new set of speakers and we were like, whoa, now I can hear what's going on, right? Or we bought the new microphone and we're like, whoa, now my stuff sounds more professional than it did. Or if you're smart, I just put up the acoustic treatment in my room and whoa, now I can actually hear what's going on and the microphone sounds better. That's one of the big purchases I always recommend to people. And I'll read to you my response to him and I will give you a few more thoughts on it. So I wrote back to Hugo and I say, thanks for writing. It's different for different people. I am over my gear acquisition syndrome, my G.A.S. But there were many years when I wasn't. And I got to tell you, it's better here on the other side of being over G.A.S, gear acquisition syndrome. You might have noticed that I have a very minimal shot here. I have like the same shot in every episode of the podcast because two reasons. One, I don't love to just glorify gear and have like racks and racks of gear behind me. And also because my current setup for mastering is not very gear-centric. I master almost exclusively with digital tools these days, where I used to master on a totally analog system. And those of you who know my story know that I was mastering at Joe Lambert Mastering. I still do all of my mastering through Joe Lambert Mastering, but I do it here in my own studio now. And I worked on an analog system, getting really good results, and it taught me a lot to master on this super fancy high-end analog stuff. But I'm able to, I believe, and my clients tell me, create the same results using just exclusively digital tools, and I can do it quicker, and I can do it with easier recall and all that by doing it digitally. So there's not a lot of gear to put in the shot. I could put my speakers in the shot, like my real speakers. That would be nice and fancy. They're here in front of me. I don't do that for a couple reasons. One, because I like to be able to look at my screen when I'm doing stuff, and it would be awkward to shoot the other way. And also because I actually change my speakers sometimes, and I'm always trying out different things. I'm reviewing different speakers. And it's funny, whenever the speakers in the background, like all of the questions are, hey, what kind of speakers are those, bro? And I prefer questions about the substance of things. So I try to make it not very gear-centric here. Now, I kept on writing to him. I said to Hugo, I still do buy things from time to time, but not really about lust. I'm doing it more of an immediate need and justifiable workflow improvements and reinvestment rather than out of lust. And my system is in many ways more minimal now than in the past. I try to focus on the investments that make the biggest difference, which I think helps a lot with this. So exactly how much gear you buy is not as important as your relationship with it. How it affects your finances, how it affects your workflow, and how it affects your mental health. There's no right or wrong amount of gear. You could buy a ton of gear and have a very healthy relationship with that gear. I think of a friend of mine, Joel Hamilton, who has a studio called Studio G down in Brooklyn. And I learned a lot from Joel. I think he does fantastic sounding work, and he has a fantastic amount of gear. But that gear is gear he acquired bit by bit, not because he needed them to make great sounding records. He was making great sounding records using not a lot of gear, but because each time some money came in, it's like, well, some money for me, but some money for the studio, and some money for fun things in the studio, things that keep me inspired. There's this new tool that I like to use. I might like, in addition to the sound of it, the look of it and the feel of it and the history of it and the story of it. And you might also like the fact that at a certain point, if you're actually making profit off your studio, that if you take $1,000 and call it profit and move it from the ether to your bank account, you're paying taxes on that $1,000 of profit. But if you buy a $1,000 piece of gear, all of a sudden, there's no taxes that you pay on that gear. And unlike dollars, which can be freshly printed up very quickly, which we're experiencing right now in this point of history, where they're just, 10 trillion new dollars, let's just make them, let's just hand them out, 10 trillion new dollars. What's a dollar? Dollar for you, dollar for me, 1,200 here, 1,200 there. It's harder to do that with things like vintage Neve compressors. So they hold their value in a world where things are getting devalued, right? And if you were to go for some other type of inflation hedge with your investments, like you want to invest in gold or silver or stocks or something that you thought was going to be a good inflation hedge, you'd have to book some of that money as profit, pay taxes on it, and then buy the inflation hedge. And then when you sell it, pay taxes on it again. But if you were to buy a piece of gear for your studio that was likely not to go down in value, but maybe go up in value, that's your inflation hedge right there. That's your tax savings right there. So there can actually be a positive financial relationship with gear, potentially, for people who really like a gear and are making good profits in the studio and want to turn some of those profits into reinvestment that they wouldn't have to pay taxes on because these things are expensive. So that's like a weird thing about gear that you might come to recognize, is that some of these studios have a lot of gear, not because they need them to make things sound better, although if they're buying the right gear, it doesn't hurt and probably helps. But they are a few things. They're a status symbol. They show how far they've come, how much money they've made in the studio, how serious they are about the studio, how invested they are in the studio. And that's something that gear can show, status. The problem is they're not a very good status symbol marker, because you can also get gear by just taking out a bunch of debt. Hey, let me run up $100,000 in credit cards. People can do that. Or let me just take out a big business loan, get all the gear. And they can give the illusion of having come up and all that, having made great records and then reinvesting. And they didn't actually do that. They just got all the gear on credit cards. So it's kind of flawed as a signaling mechanism if you're going to be a prospective client of one of these studios, because who knows how that gear got there. And it is also possible to have a very unhealthy relationship with gear, where they're not making your finances better. They're making your finances worse. Where they're not making your mental health better because they're this fun thing that you buy to make the process more enjoyable, but instead they're the thing that you think you need to have before you can do good work. So I always say to people that if you're going to invest in gear, go for the biggest wins first. What are the biggest wins? Well, transducers. I think that microphones and speakers are among the harder things to get right, and that dollars spent there often make a more significant difference than a similar amount of dollars spent on electronic gear. Like, basically, your microphone is more important than your preamp. Is it good to have both a great microphone and a great preamp? Yes. Is one of those going to have a bigger impact? Yes, and it's your microphone. Same thing with speakers. I mean, it's good to have a good interface or DAC, kind of. They're all really pretty good these days. But it's better to have really good speakers. It's just harder to get them right. So extra dollars spent there usually make a bigger difference. So your transducers, I think those are big. Your acoustic treatment, your actual room that you're going to be listening in and making all of your choices and all of your recordings in. That's another big one. And then special tools that allow you to do things that you couldn't otherwise do. You don't have a multi-band compressor in your arsenal? Maybe having a multi-band compressor lets you do new types of stuff you couldn't do before. You don't have a good denoiser in your arsenal? Maybe getting, a denoising suite is going to be super useful in the particular line of work that you're doing. You don't have a dynamic EQ in your arsenal? Maybe it's useful. You don't have like a tuning software that works at a really high level? Maybe getting a tuning software that allows you to do vocal tuning, etc. That kind of stuff that allows you to do new things. That can be a good place. And then the other big place is special skills, investing in yourself. And I think that's one of the biggest things is investing in yourself. And that could mean taking online courses, and I'm not just saying this because I sell online courses. I buy them too. I actually bought a course on selling online courses. It was useful in helping me sell my own online courses. I also, some of you know, I have a hobby, jiu-jitsu and judo as well. And I have spent more money than I'm going to tell my wife on online jiu-jitsu courses, but they're super useful. Man, the things I've learned from those that have helped out my hobby, my game. And if music is your hobby, your game, and not your career, then online courses in this world can make you feel more confident and get better at it really fast. I can see how it's done that for me in my own life in learning new skills. So that's another great place to think about putting your gas. So I think that's the idea. Do people get over it? Do professionals get over it? Some of them, yes. Some of them, no. Some of them don't get over it, and they continue to have an unhealthy relationship with gear, at least some of the time, well into their life being successful. And some of them still buy gear, but they have a healthy relationship with it, and they know they're not getting the gear to make the record for them, but to be a fun additional thing, a reinvestment, all these other things that we talked about and established here. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the SonicScoop podcast. If you do want to invest in fun software tools, SoundToys is sponsoring this episode, so check them out, soundtoys.com. You can try out anything they make for free. I would say that if you were to buy their entire bundle, that is money well spent on creative mixing effects. I think that's a place where you have those special tools that allow you to do things you couldn't do before. Really fun. Saturators, the biggest Swiss Army knife of delay ever made, the Echo Boy. Some of these kinds of tools that allow you to improve your workflow in a way that you didn't, have a good workflow before. And now you open up Echo Boy and you're like, I can do anything I want to do with a delay in one place. And I don't have to do the 3 different plugins. Like, it's fantastic. So those kinds of things, great. If you want to invest in yourself, you know that I have full-length courses. They're called Mixing Breakthroughs and Mastering Demystified. This should be no surprise. I think they're super useful and will help you improve what you do. But if you want something totally for free, you can get my workshop, The 5 Habits of Truly Great Mixers, at SonicScoop.com/mixhabits. That's SonicScoop.com/mixhabits. Also, Mastering 101. You can get it at SonicScoop.com/Mastering 101. It's my workshop all about mastering. I let my hair down today because I think I'm going to cut it. I haven't cut my hair since my daughter was born. So this is almost a bit over 2 years worth of hair growth. And I want to let it down one more time before I get rid of it. The only reason I have hair this long is because of being lazy. I've always cut my hair at home. And my wife used to help me trim the back. But then I had a daughter, and with an infant around the house, my wife didn't want to help me trim the back anymore. So I was like, I guess I'm growing it long. So I got long. So it was a fun experiment to do. But, I don't think I need to be the Fabio of audio engineering much longer with this stuff. So I think I'm going to get rid of it, mostly because it's getting in the way of jiu-jitsu. You guys, give me your fashion advice. What should be the next look for this Justin Colletti character? Am I the David Bowie of audio nerds that I have to change my look every now and then? So this is it. This is the last of it. This is the last you guys are going to see it, I think. I'm actually filming this episode in advance along with some other episodes. So by the time you see this, it might be gone. So Do you want to put in your vote for keeping it? I don't know. I think it's gone. I think this is it, guys. So you vote down below. Should I get rid of it? Should I have gotten rid of it? Is it a good thing that it's gone now? Should I do some headbanging? I'll do a little bit of headbanging for the last shout out of hair on this thing. Isn't it ridiculous how much hair this is? Like, this is a stupid amount of hair. What should I do? Does anyone want to buy it and make it into a wig? Do you know any wig makers? Maybe we'll try to keep it all intact. For those of you on the audio-only version of the podcast, you have no idea what I'm talking right now because you can't see me, but you can write me emails at podcast@sonicscoop.com. If you have any questions, definitely hit me up at podcast@sonicscoop.com. And thanks for hanging out with me. This has been Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop. See you next time.